Good morning. Our learning is Lili Nishmas Mendel, Mariam Bas Kalman Ruvain, her Neshama Shem Aliyah. We are on Ayin Ches Amud Aleph, and we are by the two dots of Maim Kidei Lashu Behenes Akilar. In the article it's 78-1, 78A1. Okay, so again, what we've been doing is we're going through all the different substances which we are not allowed to carry on Shabbos. Well, can't carry anything on Shabbos, but we're discussing the actual measurements for anything that you can and cannot carry on Shabbos. So the Mishnah describes water and gives us a measurement for water. So Mayim Kidei Lashuf Behen Es HaKilar, water enough to mix an eye plaster. Again, so we saw this kilar was mentioned earlier. It's going to come up a couple of times in Masechah Shabbos. It's a pretty common, it seems like it was something which was used a lot, and therefore it comes up in some different discussions. But it's a number of different substances which are mixed together, and one of the substances that are used to make this eye plaster is water. So how much water at what point of carrying water would a person be chayav v'chatos for? Enough water to mix and make an eye plaster. Okay, so Amar Abaye. Abaye asks the following question, but first he makes a couple of observations. So he says, Michti, let's see. Kol milsa de shchicha v'lo shchicha. Whenever you have two one substance which has two items, one is a commonly used item and one is not commonly used. So what he means is like this. Every single substance, not every single substance, most substances have a number of different functions, right? Like if I say, I don't know, pick any household items. We'll go through a bunch of them. Let's say wine. So wine can be used for medicinal purposes. Wine can be used for drinking purposes. When it's used for medicinal purposes, we're going to imagine it's going to be used for a very small amount. It's going to be used to mix into some substance and therefore make the medicine. When it's used for drinking, it's going to be a larger amount. We don't typically drink like a shot glass of wine. We drink a revius of wine, right? So we're going to have, every item, Chazal, basically we're going through item by item, and they said, okay, let's see, what are the functions? And then they're picking one thing to say, if you carry this much, you're going to be chayav. So Abaye tries to understand, what was the thought process? So he says, if it's if it's a substance where you have a common usage and a non-common usage, so Azur Rabbanan Basar Deshchicha Lekula, Chazal followed the more common use to figure out what cannot be carried, even if it's a leniency. Okay, right? Which makes sense. Meaning you have two items, and you have again, one item, I keep on saying the two items. You have one item, and you have one common usage, one uncommon usage. Chazal picked the common usage to define the bar as to what you cannot carry. We'll see an example soon. Shchicha o shchicha, and let's say you have a substance which has two common functions. It's used for purpose X and purpose Y. Okay, then azor banan basar shchicha lechumra. Then if they're both common usages, then they have to go with the common one, even if it ends up being a stringency, meaning even if it's a small amount. Right? That makes sense. This is all logical, and we'll see how this plays out. Yain. Okay, we'll use wine as an example. Shiascho shchicha, refuaso lo shchicha. Wine is commonly used for drinking. Using wine as for medicine is not common. Therefore, drinking might be medicinal. Yes, but the point is, even then you're going to drink revius. Fair. Azra banan basar shiaso shchicha. I didn't endorse that, but yeah. Azra banan basar shiaso shchicha. So then the rabbis followed the drinking measurements, which is more common. Okay, illikula, even though it's a leniency. Meaning, if you use wine in a medicine, it's going to be, I don't know, let's just say 1 ounce, right? Let's just give some measurements. If you use it for drinking, typical drinking is revius. People don't drink less than that. Okay, so when Chazal were deciding what is the measurement needed to carry wine, one is common, one is uncommon, so it's a no-brainer. You go with the common one, even though it's a kula, meaning even though it's a larger amount. So they said, wine, if you carry a revius. I use it for medicine, but medicine's uncommon, and therefore we don't have to worry about carrying a smaller, meaning, at least for chatas, we don't have to worry about carrying a smaller amount because it's not common. Straightforward, okay? Chalaf, let's say milk. Okay, achilaso shchicha, drinking milk is common, refuaso shchicha, using milk for medicinal purposes is not as common. Azor banan basar achilaso, therefore Chazal went with the eating, the consumption, which is more common, lekula, even though it's a larger amount than the amount used for medicine, that makes sense. Dvash. When it comes to honey, achilaso shchicha, refuaso shchicha, apparently, at least back in the day, using honey was both common for eating, okay, and for healing. Therefore, Azor Rabbanan Basar Refuaso L'chumra. Therefore, Chazal went with the smaller amounts. Since they're both common, they went with the smaller amounts, i.e. the medicinal amounts, which is a smaller amount, which ends up being a chumrah. Okay? All of this seems straightforward, right? Okay, so let's see. Elamayim michli. So now Abaye gets to his question. He says, let's see water. Let's understand. Shiaso shchicha, drinking water is common. Refuaso lo shchicha, using water for an eye plaster is not common. Okay, so my taima azor banan basar refuaso lechumra. So why, when it comes to water, did we go with the smaller amounts? Right? Based on the principle, and we've proven that this is a consistent using this principle. Why do we go with the smaller amounts? So we have two possible answers. Amar Abaye. Abaye says like this: either begalila shanu, either the Tana of the Mishnah was writing in the Galil. The Galil was a very poor place, and since they were very poor, they would use water for healing purposes. In other words, whereas in other places, to make these eye plasters, they would use other substances. That's because they had other substances at their disposal. Whereas in the Galil, they did not. And the only thing they would use is water. And therefore, there, it actually was common to use water for healing purposes. And therefore, the premise of the question was off. The answer is that water is both common for drinking and for healing. And that's why they use the healing measurements. That's a straightforward answer. Rava has a different answer. Even if you want to tell me it's other places where water, but he said where they're not as poor, still water is seen as common for healing. Okay, Kiddush Shmuel, because Shmuel taught the following idea. Damar Shmuel, kol shakyane masu. All liquids can be used for the plaster, for the eye plaster. They could all be mixed in. And people would typically use wine or milk and different things. Umitale, but they cover the eye. What does it mean by they cover the eye? What that means, they cover the eye, and they ultimately are going to cause issues with vision in the long term. Levar mimaya, with the exception of water, demastu v'lo mitale, which cures and does not cover the eye. So what Shmuel seems to be teaching is as follows. It's true, if I'm understanding correctly, is that people typically do use other substances. It's just that they're making a mistake in doing so. Really, water is the preferred substance, and therefore, the water is the preferred substance in the sense that we're making these eye plasters, right? You're going to keep this thing on your eye for a while. It's going to have a long-term effect. It could have a long-term effect, and therefore water should be used, and therefore maybe people sometimes use other substances, but water really should be used, and therefore we're going to treat it as common as it is for drinking. Okay, whether Shmuel is understood to be saying, and therefore people did listen to Shmuel, and therefore it just is as common, and the whole premise of the question is wrong, or he's saying that since it should be used, therefore we'll treat it as common. One way or another, the point is that he's saying it's not just limited to the Galil. Really, water is the ideal for the plaster, and therefore we're treating it as, and therefore it is just as common, and that's why we use the smaller measurement for water and not the revius. Yeah.
We're supposed to assume that in that instance, the honey and the water would be the same measure. It's the same amount that you would need for the medicinal purpose, right?
Why is that assumption?
I'm just saying that because the Mishnah specifically spoke about honey. So if Shmuel is coming and saying that honey, yes, people do use, but ideally it would be water. The amount that you need for this medicinal purpose would be the same amount of water and the same amount of honey.
So no, because honey, if you recall, honey was used for like a blemish, like a sore of some sorts. Right? Meaning it was a different type of medicinal purpose. Whereas over here, the water that we're referring to is being used for the plaster, the eye plaster.
Right, but that wouldn't be okay.
Right, so meaning the medicinal purpose in each of these things may not be the same. I mean, for milk, I think milk was the possibility, the minimal amount of milk that could have been used that was the eye plaster. But when it comes to honey was not mixed in for the eye plaster. You needed a more viscous type of. Is that the word? Yeah. Okay. Fine. Okay. Let's go further. Shoka mashkin b'revius. All other liquids. The Mishnah concludes and says all other liquids are revius. Tan Rabbanan. Dam v'chomini mashkin b'revius. Blood and any other liquid is with revius. And we're going to see two opinions. They sound like they're arguing, but we'll see they're not arguing. They're going to give very specific types of bloods where because these bloods were used for very specific purposes, the measurement is going to be different. So what are those? Rav Shimon ben Elazar Omer, dam k'dei lichol b'ayin achas, blood enough to apply to put on one eye. Shekain kochlin levirkis, because blood is applied to a speck which comes out of the eye as a healing purpose. Umayninu dema tanigolas bara. This is the blood of a wild hen. So he's not disagreeing. He's saying all bloods typically you do need a revius because all bloods is just in the category of all liquids, and you use a revius of blood. If you're going to carry blood, it has to be a substantial amount or revius. But when it comes to the blood of a wild hen, since it's only used, or people would only store this blood of a wild hen to apply to the speck protruding from the eye, therefore it's a small amount, the amount that's needed to apply to one eye. Right? So Rav Shimon ben Elazar is not arguing the Tanakama, he's just giving a specific example. Okay? Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, dam k'dei lichol bo ayin achas, shekain kochlin liyarud. Okay, so Rav Shimon Gamliel says that the amount of blood needed for one eye, because we use it to heal a cataract. Okay? What type of blood is that? Dema dechrushtina. It's the blood of a mole. Okay, so basically, again, he's not arguing, he's saying most blood, he's agreeing with the Tanakama. Most bloods are revius, but when it comes to the blood of a mole, since that's used for a cataract, therefore you would use the amount of blood needed for one eye. V'simanech, the Gemara, if you want to remember, it's a little confusing. Rav Shimon Gamliel, Rav Shimon Elazar, different types of bloods. So which one is which? So gava legava, inner for inner, bara lebara, outer for outer. What does that mean? What that means is as follows. There's the blood of a cataract is in the eye. The protrusion is outside the eye. Okay, right? So one is inside, one is outside. You want to remember which blood goes with which blood. You don't want to put the mole blood on the wrong one. So what is it? A mole is something which is found inside your home. At least if you lived in the ancient world, hopefully not nowadays. But basically, moles were found where you lived. A wild hen was found outside. So the wild hen was used for the protrusion outside of the eye. The mole is something which is in the house. That's used for the cataract inside the eye. So if you want to remember, in case you ever in case you just want to skip cataract surgery and you wanted to get figure which one is which, so you would want to remember that's in for in, out for out. Okay, fine. Then the brisa continue. We have the brisa which we've been quoting continues, and we're going to try to unpack these words a little bit cryptic at first. We'll go through it slowly, or not so slowly. B'medvar more. Okay, when is this? All these liquids about what is it said? B'motzi, regarding someone who takes out the substance. Aval b'matzniya, if a person stores a substance, kol shu chayav, he's liable even for a minute amount. Okay, so the Gemara is going to analyze those words. We're going to come back to those words, but obviously it's a little bit funny. What does it mean? Person who stores the amount, then you're liable, but you're only chayav when you take it out, right? So what does it mean for the person? When a person stores the amount, you're chayav, as opposed to someone who takes it out. If storing an item, there's no chiyuv for storing an item. So the Gemara is going to ask and explain what these words mean. But let's first continue the brisa and explain the second part. Rav Shimon Omer, b'medvar amurim b'matzniya. When are these minimum stated? By someone who stores a substance. Aval b'motzi, someone who takes it out in a chayiv el ravias, you're only chayiv for ravias. Okay, so what is Rav Shimon saying? Rav Shimon saying like this. In our Mishnah, we had a whole bunch of shiurim, a whole bunch of measurements, right? And we said anyone who takes out this measurement, you're chayiv. So, what was one of the examples? We had the water, right? So we said the water enough to make a kilar, right? Rav Shimon comes along and he says, no, all these minimum measurements are only for the person who actually puts these items away. But he says, if you're not someone who puts these items away, if you don't have in your house a storage place for water so you can make a kilar, then for you it's a revius. In other words, whereas we learned, and the Chachamim learned, we learned the way the Chachamim learned it, that those smaller measurements, which are smaller than a revius, are talking about anyone, you and me, anyone, any person. If you carry out that small amount of water, you are going to be chayav because it could be used for this purpose. Rav Shimon says, no, those smaller measurements were made for the person who puts them away. But for a regular person, for a person who doesn't put them away, you're only going to be chayav for revius. Okay, so if we were to making a chart in the air right now, because we don't have somewhere to write it on, the Chachamim said, if you recall, the Chachamim said, if I store things away, even if it's smaller. Remember, we gave the example of the guy keeping like 2 granules of salt, right? So if you're someone who's like super makman not to throw anything away, and I dropped some salt, I have 2 granules of salt, I'm going to put it into my drawer. The Chacham said, you're someone who keeps 2 granules of salt, great. If you walk outside with 2 granules of salt, you're going to be chayav. Right? Whereas Rav Shimon is saying, no, that for sure not. You're not going to be chayiv. For even the guy who stores things, it needs to follow those minimum measurements which are mentioned in the Mishnah, right? My chart is not is a little sloppy right now. Okay, so let's just get this straight. Minimal amounts. Let's say someone stores a bizarre amount, a unique amount. Chacham say if you stored a minute amount and you take it out, you are going to be chayiv. Rav Shimon says you store minimum amounts, which is not a normal thing to store, you're not chayiv, okay? Let's say you now go ahead and take out a minimal amount that some people store. So if you stored it, Rav Shimon say you're chayiv. The Chum say anyone, even if you don't store it, you're going to be chayiv, okay? And then when it comes to revius, okay, our Chum is going to say for sure you're chayiv in that case. And Rav Shimon says that's the case that a person who doesn't store is going to be chayiv. Okay, that chart made sense, sort of. Yeah. Okay, fine, good. Okay, however, Mod b'chamla Rabbi Shimon b'motzi shofchil and shusarabim. They agree when I take wastewater. Okay, if I take wastewater into a shusarabim sheshurim b'revius, they agree there it's a revius. It's not smaller, right? Whereas the chachamim normally say the shear is going to be smaller, but when it comes to wastewater, there they agree it's going to be a revius. Okay, so now let's analyze. We're going to come back and analyze the wastewater, but first we're going to analyze the first part of the brisa. Amar mar b'medvar murim b'motzi aval b'matzniya kol shehu. Right? In what case are these minimum stated? One who takes it out, someone who stores it, any amount. Right? That was the Tanakama. Ask the Gemara, Atu matzniya la motzihu? If someone who stores away does not take it out as well, like what do those words mean? What case by someone who takes it out as opposed to someone who stores it? So what's going on over here? Amar Abaye, this is the way to understand the first part of the Brisa. Hachamai Eskinan, what are we talking about? B'talmid she'amar lo rabo, you have a teacher who tells his disciple, Lech ufanei lecha li makom hamakom l'suda, go and clear a place for me to eat. Okay, so they're sitting in the house and he says, go outside, there's like this bench over there, it has some stuff on it, go make some space for me. Okay, halach ufina lo, he went and cleared out the place, davar chashav l'kol, and then he took out an item which was significant for everyone, chayav iliva, okay, he's going to be chayav for taking out, then he's saying, go prepare for me a meal outside. Okay, so he goes and he makes some space for him, and then he takes out something which is substantial for everyone, okay, then he is certainly going to be chayav. Davar she'eno chashav l'kol, if it's something which is not significant for everyone, it's a small item, it's a few granules of salt, let's say, if his master, if his teacher stored it away, then the student taking out the master's item, it's those 2 granules of salt, let's say that his master put away, his teacher put away, and he takes it outside, then he's going to be chayiv. V'lo, but if the master did not store it away and he takes out these 2 granules of salt, lo mechayiv, he's not going to be chayiv. Okay, so basically what we have over here, and the fact that it says a teacher and a student, that's just a scenario, it's a story, but it could be anyone, it could be 2 friends. Bottom line is, if I am doing something on your behalf, or for, not even on your behalf, I take that back. If I'm taking something that you stored away, even if it's a small amount, right? So you put away a small amount, and I go and take out of Tzvi's house that small amount and put it outside, then I'm going to be chayiv because of your storing away. We actually saw this Mishnah, this Rosh Shimon Elazar, very good, very, very good. So we saw this already in the Mishnah. This is the opinion of Rosh Shimon Elazar, who says that if someone stores something away, so normally we assumed, if I store something away and I take it out, then I'm going to be chayiv. That's the opinion of the Tanna Kama, the Chachamim. Rosh Shimon Elazar has a chiddush that even if you stored it out, and I go and take out what you stored out, once it was stored away by someone, even if you're not that someone, someone else comes and takes away what you stored, that already gives it enough chashivas, enough importance that I take it out, I'm going to be chayav. Make sense?
It's a bit of a leaf in the even for this situation.
Okay, yeah, bad Rebbe over here, right? Yeah, what is he doing? Okay, fine, fair enough. Okay.
Is that true even if the Rebbe doesn't tell him to do it?
I believe so. I believe the Gemara is giving this as an example, as a story. I believe, right. So the question is it because, yes, because it's not because of shlichus over here, right? In other words, let's just repeat the question. The question is it, the story listed over here is because teacher told student, go take it out. Rav Shimon Elazar's opinion, so it sounds like, and that's what Murray's asking, is it because he said go take it out? It's not because he's doing it on his behalf, right? In Shlichus Devar Ve'er, it's not a matter of doing it on your behalf, and that's where the storyline of it, a teacher and a master, is a little bit misleading. The point is a general point, and that is that when somebody stored it, and I go and take what somebody stored, then the storing itself is in and of itself makes it chashuv, and therefore even if he didn't tell me to take it out, me taking it out already it causes, then I'm taking something substantive outside because of the story, nothing because of the dialogue, nothing because of the relationship. It's simply because once he stored it, it becomes chashuv, and therefore me taking it out is already going to be a problem. Okay. Amar Mar. Let's now get into. Now we're going to analyze where we're quoting the master said in the Brisa. We're quoting the line in the Brisa which talked about the shofchin, the wastewater. Modu cham l'Rab Shimon b'motzi shofchin l'shus rabim. Cham agreed Rab Shimon regarding someone takes water into the public domain. Sheshiyura and beravias, that the minimal amount is ravias. Ask the Gemara, shofchin l'maychazu. What's going on over here? What usage is there for wastewater at all? In other words, if I take garbage out on Shabbos, am I chayiv? I don't know. I don't think so, right? Because it has no usage, right? If no function, you're only going to be chayiv for something which has usage. Wastewater is garbage, right? Why am I, even ravias, why should I be chayiv? I'm Rav Yirmiyah. Legabel behenes atit. Wastewater is used to make clay with it, right? People use wastewater to make clay, and that's why the shear of a ravias is mentioned. Ask the Gemara about Tanya atit kedei lasos ben pikor. If you recall, earlier we said that when it comes to clay, all you need is enough to make a crucible. A crucible is the thing they make, they heat up the metals with, which is a very, very minuscule amount, right? So if you're carrying clay out, all you need is enough to cover the crucible head, which is about yay big, very, very small. And now we're saying wastewater is used because it makes clay. And how much water? Revius. A revius of water to make clay is going to make like this much clay, right? So this much clay. Sorry, I'm just using it for the camera. That's not wide. Okay, but the point is that right. So what's going? There's a mix-up. Something's off over here. If you're telling me the amount of clay that you're chayav for is just the amount for a crucible, it's this big. If you're telling me the amount of water to make the amount of water that you're going to be chayav for is to make clay, and you're telling me revius that's going to make a significant amount of clay. What's happening? So lokasha, no problem. No contradiction. Hadmi gabel. The Mishnah, the Brisa, which said that the amount of clay to take out is the amount to cover the pikor, the top of the crucible. That's when you already needed the clay. So when it's already pre-existing clay, Clay already exists. Yeah, all you need is a small amount because that's a useful amount, the amount that covers a crucible. Hadilomi gabel, but when we say to revius is needed in order to be chayav, that's when it was not made yet. Why? No one's going to make clay in this amount. It's ridiculous. Meaning no one's going to ever make clay. Clay is like a cheap substance, right? So no one's going to make clay, and it's a whole process. No one's going to make clay to be such a small amount. Rather, if you don't have clay yet, then in order to make any normal person making clay, they're going to make a substantial amount of clay, like a large amount of clay. And what's the minimal amount of clay that a person would make? The amount that would be needed, a revius of water would be needed in order to make that clay. Yeah.
I don't really understand how of course it's going to be different because the clay isn't the water. The water is being used to make the clay, but the clay isn't the water.
The Havamina is, but it should be the amount of water needed to make this much clay for the Pikor.
Why? There's different things. There's different substances. Yes, you're using the water to make the cover of the crucible, but it's not. You can still be chayav for bringing out. It's completely different. It's not clay yet. It's still water.
Right, but the assumption was that we're always talking about the thing that, it's true, it's water, standalone water, but you're saying, why is this water special? Because it makes clay. Okay, well, how much clay is normally special? This amount. So wouldn't it be the amount of water needed to make this amount of clay, which is seen as special clay? Like, significant? Okay, I think you're very comfortable with the answer. It seems like, but it sounds okay. Okay, so let's just start the next Mishnah and then we'll pick up the Gemara tomorrow. Okay, Hamotzi Chevel. We'll go quickly. Person takes out rope. K'dilasas ozen lekupa. Again, so all these things we're going to find a function for these different things. Okay, so if a person takes out rope, it's enough to make a handle for a basket. Gemi, reed grass, k'dilasas tzlai lenaf lechavara is enough to make a hanging loop for a sieve. In other words, in their kitchens they would have a lot of hooks, right? Now it's like trendy again to do that. They have like in the kitchens you have like the pans and things hanging, so they would have like all these things would be made with like a little hook in order to hang it. Okay, so Yehuda Omer midas min alakatan. When this substance enough to make the measurement of a child's foot, they were smart enough not to take a child to a shoe store because children don't like being in shoe stores. So what would they do? They would measure the foot with a piece of reed grass, then bring it to the shoe store, meaning the person making the shoes, and they would make it around that size. Okay, niyar paper kesher enough to write a collector's receipt on it. Vamotzi kesher mochsin chayav. Person takes a tax collector's receipt, you're liable. The first explain what this means is that let's say I'm writing on a substance which normally needs to be bigger. Let's say whatever the substance is, it's a large substance. But as long as I'm able to write, and normally I would need it to be much larger. But if I end up writing a tax receipt on a substance, then otherwise it needs to be much larger. Once I write a tax receipt on it, you're chayav. Just because even if it's normally something which this substance needs to be much larger, if I was able to write a tax receipt on it, then regardless of the size, you're going to be chayav. Okay, niyar machuk, erase paper enough to cover the mouth of a small flask of balsam oil. That's what erase paper was. They recycled a lot more than we do. So erase paper was used as a cover, like kind of like a piece of foil or a plug for balsam oil. Or hide. Well, hide is basically, it's like parchment, but it's not as fine as parchment. So you can't use it for svarim, but it is still used to write on. To make an amulet on it. Klaf, that's parchment. Enough to write the smallest passage, which is found in Tefillin, which is Shema Yisrael. Dio ink kedei lichlov shtei osios, enough to write 2 letters. Kechol, eye paint kedei lichol ayin achas, enough to paint 1 eye. Devek, glue kedei litem brosha shafshaf, in order to place in the head of a board. We'll see what that is in the Gemara. Zephis v'gafris, pitch or sulfur kedei lasus nekev, to form a hole. Basically, what we're referring to over here is they used mercury back in the day. They didn't realize, whatever. It was quite common. And so basically, they would have these small vials, and they would cover it first with pitch or sulfur, and then poke a hole through it, and that way they could pour out little bits of mercury, and then to plug the hole, they would use some more pitch or sulfur. So it's a tiny little amount that was used. Okay, shava wax katan for a small hole. This was used to stop up a hole of a barrel when they would pour wine. Instead of like a wine stopper or a cork, they would use a little bit of wax to cover the hole. Charas is crushed brick. This was used to cover or to surround the crucible of the gold refiners. Rabbi Yehuda was pitputs, enough to patch up a tripod. We'll see the Gemara is going to get into more detail about that. Subin brand enough to place in the opening of a crucible of gold refiners. It seems like they use bran as part of the fuel. Sid, lime was used as a what do they call it? Like wax, right? Is that the word? Right? Basically, people used to take out hair. So you have machlokas ketana shebabanos, either to smear upon the smallest, like a pinky of a small girl. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Says kilkul, in order to make the hair on the temple lay flat. They would sometimes use it to cover the temples in order to have the hair over there stay down. Enough to smear on the forehead, and use this again used for waxing purposes. The Gemara is going to go into much more detail. Have a great day. Have a good Shabbos.